Anwar Ibrahim has been called Malaysia's longest Prime Minister in waiting. Now I'm outside National Palace in Kuala Lumpur, where the swearing-in ceremony is just moments away.
And I'm Afifah Arifin, standing by live here at a clubhouse in Kajang, Selangor, where Mr Anwar Ibrahim will address the media soon after he takes over the premiership.
And Malaysian equities giving their thumping support for the new Prime Minister at the ending of a political impasse. The benchmark KLCI rallying up nearly 4% today with a 2% gain of the local currency against the US dollar. The ringgit, the best performer in Asia.
Plus, from finance minister to prisoner and now Malaysia's leader, we look back at the ups and downs of Mr Anwar's long political career. Anwar Ibrahim is just minutes away from a job he waited years to get. The Pakatan Harapan leader is going to be sworn in as Malaysia's new Prime Minister this hour. Now, the announcement of his appointment came from the palace after the king met with his fellow rulers to try to break a political impasse. The PH coalition won 82 seats in last Saturday's election, short of the 112 needed to form a government, and needs to team up with other forces. UMNO, the largest component party of the incumbent Barisan Nasional coalition, has said it will support and obey the King's order to participate in a unity government. A unanimous decision was made at a special UMNO Supreme Council meeting last night. Party Secretary General Ahmad Mazlan says the move would ensure that a stable government can be formed. However, the decision by UMNO's Supreme Council has yet to be endorsed by the wider BN coalition that the party leads. This includes the 30 elected MPs. CNA's Melissa Goh, she joins us live now from the Istana Negara in Kuala Lumpur, where Mr Anwar will be sworn in shortly. Mel, what exactly can we expect?
Well, the swearing-in ceremony is going to be steeped in tradition. It's going to be happening near the throne room inside the National Palace before Sultan Abdullah Ahmad Shah. Now, he will be basically reading out the oath of office as well as the pledge of allegiance, and he will be signing documents as well. It's going to be a short and sweet ceremony, and Anwar's topping the agenda for his administration, of course, is to figure out how to form his government, his coalition government, first of its kind, a unity government involving so many coalition partners, and he will have to sort out how to position that and also to craft out the cabinet lineup, equally spreading them among the coalition partners. Of course, in the weeks ahead, he will also have to worry about the budget. Remember, the budget next year was tabled but not passed. He will have to sort that out in order to be able to pay the civil servants they're expecting to pay next month.
Oh, sounds like there is plenty on Mr Anwar Ibrahim's plate. Melissa, thanks for that, but do stay with us. We're going to get back to you as the ceremony progresses a little later. In the meantime, let's go to CNA's Afifah Arifin. She joins us live from Kajang, Selangor, where Anwar Ibrahim will address the media after he takes over the premiership. Now, major news coming from the Istana Negara, Afifah. What exactly are you hearing on the ground? What's the sentiment like?
That's right. So Mr Anwar Ibrahim appointment as Prime Minister ends 5 days of unprecedented political crisis here in Malaysia following the inconclusive elections. So soon after the announcement, of course, his supporters as well as some Pakatan Harapan leaders were over the moon. As soon as the news broke from Istana Negara, we saw dozens of supporters gathered outside of Anwar Ibrahim's house in Sungai Long here in Kajang, Selangor. We also saw a lot of congratulatory messages pouring in, but we just heard from Perikatan Nasional, moments ago. They had a press conference by its chief Muhyiddin Yassin, and Mr Muhyiddin Yassin had asked Mr Anwar to prove his numbers, because Muhyiddin Yassin is claiming Perikatan Nasional had 115 MPs who signed the support to him to become Prime Minister, and that the Istana statement only mentioned the appointment of Anwar Ibrahim as Prime Minister, but no mention of a unity government. So that's the reaction from the Perikatan Nasional side. But back to Pakatan Harapan, we know that some of the PH leaders have also urged their supporters to remain calm. PKR's Deputy President Rafizi Ramli had asked his supporters not to hold any celebrations or gatherings in order to avoid risking any provocations. It's a similar tone from DAP, who's asked its supporters not to hold gatherings or any vehicle convoys. In fact, its Secretary General Anthony Loke had said that the government that will be formed will be a unity government that comprises various political parties. We also spoke to many people on the street, asking them how they felt about Anwar Ibrahim's appointment as Prime Minister. They said that they want stability and a focus on reviving the economy, something that Anwar Ibrahim has promised throughout his campaign. Let's listen in to what else he said.
All right, thanks Afifa Arifin for speaking to us live from Kajang, Selangor. Now, we are going back to Melissa Goh, who is standing by at the Istana Negara in KL. Mel, from footage that we have seen earlier, it looks like the ceremony, swearing-in ceremony, is going to be taking place anytime soon.
Yes, the King and Queen, Sultan Abdullah Ahmad Shah and Queen Aziza, they stroll in just now, hand in hand, clad in turquoise, in a traditional Malay outfit. And now they're seated at the throne room, Singhasana, inside the National Palace right behind me. They're waiting for the swearing-in ceremony of Malaysia's 10th Prime Minister to start. Now we are seeing in attendance some members of parliament as well, but I can't really tell. They are all clad in their traditional Malay outfit, together with headgear, the songkok, which is a must when you visit a palace.
That's right, Melissa. As what you've mentioned, we can see what's taking place in the palace now. Typically, you know, that involves the oath of office, the pledges of allegiance, roughly such a ceremony. And we can see there Mr Anwar Ibrahim and his wife seated there. But typically such a ceremony, just run us through how long it takes.
Usually it's a short and sweet ceremony. Dr. Wan Aziza, Anwar Ibrahim's wife, seated next to him. She's been a torchbearer for him when he was incarcerated, put behind bars. Now, there will be two sets of documents, right? One is the oath of office, another one is the...
Well, Mr Anwar Ibrahim will be going to be sworn in as Malaysia's 10th Prime Minister. Let's listen in.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Wallahi wabillahi watallahi. Saya Anwar bin Ibrahim setelah dilantik memegang jawatan seorang Perdana Menteri dengan sesungguhnya bersumpah
do solemnly swear that I will faithfully discharge the duties of that office to the best of my ability, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to Malaysia and will preserve, protect and defend its constitution. In the name of God the most merciful, I, Anwar bin Ibrahim, do solemnly swear that I will not communicate or reveal to any person, whether directly or indirectly, any matter which shall be brought under my consideration or shall become known to me as a Prime Minister, except as may be required for the due discharge of my duties as such, or as may be specially permitted by the Yang di-Pertuan Agong.
Menjunjung kasih Tuanku.
With your indulgence, Your Majesty.
Right there you have it. Mr Anwar Ibrahim, Pakatan Harapan's chief. He is signing pledges of allegiance. And as we speak, you're looking at pictures of Mr Anwar Ibrahim's decades-long wait to be Malaysia's Prime Minister coming true as he is being sworn in as the new Prime Minister. Now, this moment comes after a council of rulers meeting called by the king to break the political impasse.
Okay, spotted in the hall, witnessing the swearing-in ceremony, members of parliament from Pakatan Harapan, and also those from UMNO, led Barisan Nasional. I spotted Zahid, the party president of UMNO, Barisan chairman, as well as his number 2, Muhammad Hassan, also in attendance. The Attorney General is there, as well as the Speaker of Parliament, Art Harun. Now the Chief Justice is witnessing the documents, make sure they are all ready, in order. Anwar Ibrahim took a bow and he returned to sit with his wife, Dr. Wan Aziza.
Mufti Wilayah Persekutuan akan menghadap untuk memimpin bacaan doa.
To lead the prayers for this occasion. With your indulgence, Your Majesty.
Akan menghadap memimpin bacaan doa.
الحمد لله الذي وفقنا لطاعته وهدانا لعبادته وخصنا برسالة حبيبه ورسوله اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على عبدك ورسولك سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه صلاة وسلاما دائمين متلازمين إلى يوم الدين.
This is the Mufti of the Federal Territory. He's reciting a prayer right now. May Allah bless the administration. It's a traditional ceremony as well, after the swearing in of Prime Minister, to bless his administration.
Sempena istiadat pemilihan surat acara pelantikan dan istiadat mengangkat sumpah jawatan dan
Certainly a historic moment. Mr Anwar's Pakatan Harapan coalition, they won 82 seats in the elections, short of the 112 seats needed to form the government. Mel, could you just give us a recap of what happened to take us to this very moment we're witnessing?
Well, remember, for the first time in Malaysia, not a single coalition has the minimum majority to form the government. So for the first time, the King, Sultan Abdullah Ahmad Shah, is tasking them, led by Anwar Ibrahim, to come up with a unity government where the coalitions will play a role in the government in order to represent all races, all religions, and across all regions. Now, Malaysia, there's East and West Malaysia, there's Sabahan and Sarawakians, and also in Malaysia, there are the different ethnic groups as well. They must be represented in the government. They must be able to work out a working government that's functioning. At the same time, with built-in checks and balance. Just how is it going to take place? We'll have to wait and see. Mr Anwar has his work cut out because it's a first. But he is aided by his good team of leaders, both from Democratic Action Party as well as from Amanah, the National Trust Party as well. Now, he will be working not just with Barisan Nasional and UMNO-led Barisan Nasional, also the Sarawak-based GPS, Sabah-based GRS, as well as Warisan partners. There's going to be a huge majority in the government, a strong and stable one. That's what the king hopes to see. But exactly how it's going to be executed, it remains to be seen. This is uncharted waters that Malaysia has entered into because never had a unity government form in such a way. And Anwar basically have to hit the ground running because it's already coming up to December and the civil servants will have to get paid in January. And if the budget is not passed, there's no money going out. So his priority, apart from coming up with the cabinet lineup, which a tall order on its own, is to pass the budget and make sure that the money is disbursed and also fix the economy as we enter a possible global economic recession, address the rising cost of living. That's number one. Key concerns of the people. They want the country to move on. We've lost enough time with the political bickering. And Malaysia, they said, is losing out. The people are concerned they're losing out to Indonesia and neighbouring countries. We have a lot of catch-up to do, they said, and they hope that this government will put the people first and work together as one team. Of course, with built-in checks and balance, because there's nothing that Sri Anwar hates the most is corruption and leakage. Well, we'll see what sort of mechanism that he will put in place to make sure there's checks and balance in his administration on that front as well.
Well, certainly, you know, the outcome of this GE15 has been unprecedented. So I imagine that, I mean, Anwar has to decide very carefully who he wants in his cabinet, recalling what happened to, you know, Pakatan Harapan before.
Well, indeed, he has to be fair because his government is going to be a unity government and he will have to craft out the seats and the portfolios to the individual parties, whether it's going to be according to commensurating the seats, representing of seats that they won, or it's going to be equal representation from each coalition partners. There's got to be a formula that he has to work out that's fair and that basically pleases everyone so that they can work together. It's no mean feat because all the parties, they have history. I mean, the political treacheries, the animosity runs deep among these parties. And he will have to make sure that they close rank, consolidate sort of within his administration so that under him, they work as a team to move forward. Otherwise, it's just not going to be stable or sustainable, this government.
Stability, sustainability, I think that's what all Malaysians want. What happens now, though, to the second best performing coalition, Perikatan Nasional, which is led by Muhyiddin Yassin? They did say that, you know, they're not going to work with PH, but they did a U-turn on that.
They did. At the 11th hour, we are hearing from Perikatan Nasional, Secretary General Hamzah Zainuddin, that they are now considering be part of the unity government. And their leader, former Prime Minister Muhyiddin Yassin, is calling for a news conference as well at their office. The details, I haven't got them yet, but I'll give you latest. But they are keen now to be back, to work in a unity government. But as I said, it won't be easy because the political animosity and the bad blood, I would say, among the party leaders. A lot of them were political frogs. They were known as a backdoor government. A lot of political frogging, defections, jumping here and there, that hopefully the newly passed anti-party hopping law will be able to put an end to all these. But it's still early days. We haven't seen the government yet. And it may be weeks or months before we start to see how the government is going to function and whether it's a workable, sustainable, lasting one. It remains to be seen.
Ketiga tadi yang amat berhormat Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim bersama isteri tercinta yang amat berbahagia.
Well, it looks like that's it.
All right, Melissa,
the ceremony has ended.
That's right, it has ended indeed. A historic moment we've just witnessed there. Short and sweet, all of 10 minutes. Thank you very much, Mel, for that coverage there. It is official. After a decades-long wait, we have indeed just witnessed Pakatan Harapan's Chief Anwar Ibrahim. He has been sworn in as Malaysia's new Prime Minister. It's 10th, and he was sworn in at the Istana Negara in KL, also ending 5 days of unprecedented post-election crisis after inconclusive polls. And we believe that he will be speaking to the media for the first time as Prime Minister very shortly. We'll have more coverage of that. And also bearing in mind that this historic moment comes after a Council of Rulers meeting which had to be called by the King to break the political impasse. Now, we will also be having a guest later on the show to talk about Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim's immediate tasks, following he has plenty on his plate now that he is the Malaysia's Prime Minister. Well, on that note, we are going to go for a short break. We've got your Asia Business Update. That's coming up next with Ronan Lim, including a roundup of what else but Malaysian stocks cheering the political breakthrough in the country, which brought the much-needed clarity and certainty to the stock market.
We are standing together with a lot of giants around the world.
Big breakthroughs.
Heart regeneration is the ultimate goal of treating heart failure.
Come with big challenges.
We were worried this abnormal liver function test may actually be a side effect of the study drug.
How did some of the brightest minds behind groundbreaking studies on heart disease overcome their obstacles? Rediscovering the heart. Tonight on CNA.
Brought to you by the Yong Lu Lin School of Medicine, National University of Singapore.
The 20th Party Congress. Xi Jinping has secured an unprecedented third term as president.
China will be more united and more stable than ever before.
Some people say up to 80% of the people support him.
But can his popularity at home translate on the global stage?
The back of the world will be very much fed up with China's warrior diplomacy.
The next 5 years of Xi, Insight, tonight on CNA.
When you hear the phrase climate change, this image may come to mind.
And you may be thinking, oh no, not again.
But wait! Hi, I'm Edward Choi.
And I'm his wife, Jo Tan.
We consider ourselves green warriors, and we want to talk about why so many of us care about climate change.
But don't act on it.
It comes down to the way our brain works and how often it leads us to make wrong decisions.
So we have errors in our perceptions, and that can be caused by or lead to cognitive biases.
If we use this sort of decision making in all parts of our life, then we would veer towards making some not so good decisions.
Join us as we explore cognitive theories.
Does the coffee cup come into your decision at all? Oh, okay.
And show you how to hack our cognitive biases to start making greener decisions.
Because we are in Singapore, it affects us more.
Who cares about polar bears?
25th November, Friday on CNA.
This Saturday, will it be business as usual as Malaysia gets a new government?
Political stability is becoming a very rare commodity.
Why private jets are reaching new heights.
It's efficiency from time and money spent.
Plus the investment lure of luxury properties for healing and leisure.
It's not just for the elite anymore.
Money Mind, Saturday at 10:30 p.m.
Can't wait to start my journey to release already. 终于见到你了！你不是找他们讲？还没有。好了。
Hey gentlemen, today is your big day. We are going to release center for vocational training. I wish you all the best.
Yeah, thank you. Hello.
Hello again. You are watching Asia Now here on CNA. As promised, time for a business update with Roland.
Yes, good afternoon. Malaysian equity is clearly expressing positive sentiment following a breakthrough in the political stalemate. The KLCI, that's the Malaysian Benchmark Index, well, that's up 4% for the day. Remember, at the half-time break during the morning, was up 2% on the news that the Fed would slow down its pace of rate hikes after Anwar was confirmed as Prime Minister. It's gained another 2% for the day. And the ringgit is also advancing against the greenback. It is now changing hands at $1 to 4.49. That's up more than 1% for the day. Gaming and brewery companies, including Genting Malaysia, Sports Toto, Magnum, Carlsberg Brewery, all jumping. Now, investors are buying back in as the uncertainty over the new government is over when shares fell on Monday. Anwar's administration expected to be more liberal and reform-oriented. Over in South Korea, its central bank has returned to its usual slow pace of policy tightening at its final rate-setting meeting this year. Now, the move aims to battle inflation without weighing on economic growth and exacerbating credit risks. The Bank of Korea raised the key 7-day repurchase rate by a modest 25% to 3.25%. That's in line with market expectations. The Bank of Korea delivered 2 half-point hikes this year as it sought to keep pace with the U.S. Federal Reserve's rapid rate rises. The smaller margin of increase reflects the central bank's concern that higher rates may aggravate the strain on households that have built up record debt and also may tip the economy into recession. Meanwhile, the country's widening trade deficit, coupled with the Fed's sharp tightening, have weighed on the Korean won, which has fallen to a 13-year low last month. And this fueled inflation further in the country, which has edged up 5.7% in October. Now, still in South Korea, unionized truckers have kicked off a nationwide strike. The second in less than 6 months, the strike is stoking worries over supply disruptions amid post-pandemic recovery efforts. The organizing union kicked off 16 rallies across the country, including a port in Ulsan that houses Hyundai's main manufacturing plant. The union estimated some 22,000 took part in the rallies, while the Transport Ministry said about 10,000 people attended. The truckers are calling on the government to make a minimum pay system that is due to expire at the end of the year permanent. They're also pushing for the expansion of benefits for truckers in other industries, including oil tankers. The government has agreed to extend the scheme for 3 years, but has rejected other union demands. The unions have warned that the strike could stop oil supplies at major refineries and transportation at major ports and industrial plants. The earlier 8-day strike back in June resulted in massive delays of cargo shipments, costing more than $1.2 billion in lost output and unmet deliveries. Now, markets in Asia-Pacific rising after the U.S. Fed signaled a switch to smaller rate hikes soon. The KLCI, as mentioned earlier, leading the region's advance, hitting a 15-month high. Japan's Nikkei 225 coming back from a break yesterday, adding nearly 1%, 28,383 for the day. And the Kospi also up after the rate decision, most large-cap shares rising on the news. And in Sydney, the ASX 200 adding gains for the third straight session, the highest close since May. And sentiment was supported by mining and tech counters. Let's do a quick check on currencies as well. Dollar index, which measures the greenback against the 6 major peers, other currencies, is down by 0.3%, 105.71. And the Japanese yen is also strengthening slightly against the US dollar. $1 changing hands for 138.68 yen. Likewise, the Korean yen is also up against the US dollar. And that's the latest in business. Back to you.
Thanks very much, Roland. Still ahead on Asia Now, we are going to be getting more analysis on what a historic day it is in Malaysian politics, with Anwar Ibrahim sworn in as Prime Minister, a job he's been waiting and dreaming about for 25 years. And we're also going to be speaking with Dr. Oi Sun, Senior Fellow at the Singapore Institute of International Affairs.
of folklore and mythologies really existed in public spaces back then. Everything has a story behind it.
I was part of something very special. All of a sudden, everything's gone.
That was the first time that we realized that we could lose our lives.
Who can tell Asia stories better than us? Documentaries you don't want to miss. Every Saturday. Exclusively on CNA. What are the financial forces driving Asia's rise? From cross-border business expansion and technology for digital connectivity to capturing growth opportunities in the region and beyond. Understand the trends, innovations and corporate deals that are building Asia. Catch a new episode every fortnight on CNA and CNA.Asia.
Hundreds of angsana trees were dying a month. How can we stop the disease?
Anwar Ibrahim has just been sworn in as Malaysia's 10th Prime Minister. His Pakatan Harapan coalition won 82 seats in last Saturday's election, short of the 112 needed to form a government. The King played a central role in breaking the political impasse, announcing Mr Anwar's appointment after meeting his fellow rulers. CNA's Afifa Arifin joins us live from Kajang, Selangor, where Anwar Ibrahim will be addressing the media after he takes over the premiership. Major news coming out from the Istana Negara, historic, pretty much. What is the general sentiment you're getting on the ground?
That's right, Oteli. So we're here at a clubhouse in Kajang, Selangor, and this is where Mr Anwar Ibrahim will come to right after he leaves the palace after being sworn in as Malaysia's 10th Prime Minister. As you can see, the media were all gathered here waiting for his arrival. Of course, when the news first broke earlier, people, his supporters and Pakatan Harapan leaders were over the moon with the announcement. We saw a lot of the supporters gathered outside of Mr Anwar Ibrahim's house in Sungai Long right before he left the palace. Congratulatory messages have also been pouring in. But over at the Perikatan Nasional side, we know that the coalition's chief, Muhyiddin Yassin, had given a press conference just moments ago. And during that press conference, he asked Mr Anwar Ibrahim to prove his numbers, because to him, he says that he has the majority, 115 MPs declaring support for him to become Prime Minister. He also said that the Istana Negara's statement only mentioned the appointment of Anwar Ibrahim as Prime Minister, and there was no mention of a unity government. Coming back to the Pakatan Harapan side, we know that some of the PH leaders have urged their supporters to be calm and cautious. We know that PKR's Deputy President Rafizi Ramli has asked his supporters not to hold any celebrations or gatherings in order to avoid risking any provocation. Similarly, with DAP, its party has told its members not to hold any vehicle convoys or celebration. Its Secretary General Anthony Lok has asked its supporters to remain calm. He also said that the government that will be formed will be a unity government involving various political parties. Now, we also spoke to a lot of people on the ground, asking them how they felt about Anwar Ibrahim's appointment as Prime Minister. They want him to ensure stability and to focus on the economy, which is something that he has been promising throughout the campaign. Let's listen to what they said.
I am a full supporter of Anwar Ibrahim. So I am very happy. My family are very happy. My children are very happy.
What do you want his government to give?
Every race, Malay, Chinese, Indian, everybody. We want good government.
I think Malaysia will be changing. Definitely will be our economy will be boost after this. That's all. I'm happy he win that. He win this election and became elected as the Prime Minister.
Very happy. Yeah, I stand for unity.
Okay, so what do you hope that him as the Prime Minister, what do you hope he can do for the country?
Unity, and of course bring back the economy, state stability. Yeah, and Malaysia will rise again.
For me, I
I have no problem. As long as the Malay is dibela lah. Maksudnya kita tak nak ada kesusahan pada orang Melayu lah. Saya lebih ke risau pasal tu je lah, because there's a PH, right? PH dia bekerjasama dengan DAP kan. So itu je lah orang Melayu punya kebimbangan. Kalau tak ada apa-apa gangguan ataupun kesusahan untuk orang Melayu, I'm okay.
So for Mr Anwar Ibrahim, as the nation's 10th Prime Minister, his tasks will be to revive the economy while also calming down ethnic tensions, which has been rising since Saturday's results. There's still no clarity yet in terms of what his appointment means for policy as well as his cabinet. Now, we're here with the media all here waiting for him. I'm sure we'll have many, many questions for the new Prime Minister. We'll bring you all the latest developments as they come.
All right, we'll leave you to await for the arrival of Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim. Thank you very much, Afifa Arifin, speaking to us live there from Kajang, Selangor. And so, a long-held dream to be Malaysia's Prime Minister finally comes true for Anwar Ibrahim. He was on the cusp of becoming the country's premier, but was twice brought down by sodomy and corruption convictions. Well, Mr Anwar was in prison for years, but he never gave up on his quest to redefine Malaysian politics. CNA's Chan Yu Yim looks back.
75-year-old Anwar Ibrahim has served as the leader of the opposition and chairman of Pakatan Harapan since 2020. He started his political career as a founder of youth organisation Angkatan Belia Islam Malaysia. After joining UMNO, the major party in the long-time ruling Barisan Nasional coalition, he held several high-profile cabinet positions in the 1980s and 1990s. He was Deputy Prime Minister of Malaysia from 1993 to 1998 and was Finance Minister from 1991 to 1998. However, he was removed from all posts by Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad in September 1998. Anwar was jailed in April 1999 after a trial for sodomy and corruption that was criticized by human rights groups and several foreign governments. He was released in 2004 after his conviction was overturned. Anwar was the leader of the opposition from 2008 to 2015 and united the opposition parties, which unsuccessfully campaigned in the 2008 and 2013 elections. He was sentenced to another 5 years imprisonment after a second sodomy conviction in 2015. While still in prison, Anwar rejoined Mahathir under new coalition Pakatan Harapan in absentia, which went on to win the 2018 general election. Mahathir outlined a plan for Anwar to take over from himself as Prime Minister after an unspecified interim period. A few days after the election, Anwar received a royal pardon from the king and was released from prison. He soon made a comeback as a backbencher MP after winning the 2018 Port Dickson by-election. Anwar became the leader of the opposition in May 2020 after the collapse of the PH coalition.
And for more, Dr. Oh San, Senior Fellow at the Singapore Institute of International Affairs, joins us now. Now, Dr. Oh, I'm just wondering, what are some of the immediate priorities for Anwar Ibrahim? He has a lot on his plate, but he will certainly remember the downfall of the last Pakatan Harapan administration. And what do you think he's going to be doing differently this time round?
Well, his immediate priority would be to table a budget in the Malaysian Parliament. That would also be, in a sense, a proof of his majority in Parliament because we have less than 1 month before the next financial year would kick in. But in general, reviving the economy will be Anwar's absolute priority. And I think if he focuses on indeed trying to bring inflation down, trying to create more jobs, trying to make sure that the food supply in Malaysia is sufficient and so on, then I think that people would indeed rally around him. If his administration is still plagued with the kind of power struggles that was very prevalent both in the Pakatan Harapan administration, as well as in the subsequent two administrations, then this government may not be as stable as it now appears.
And part of that, achieving that, unity that has been talked a lot about is who he's going to be including in the cabinet. He must make it seem fair in order to keep the unity intact. Let's just walk through some of the important portfolios and some names that you have in mind.
Well, for example, his party deputy Rafizi Ramli is widely considered to be very expert in, for example, financial matters. So Rafizi Ramli as either economics or finance minister would be a suitable portfolio. And because judging from the ceremony just now, UMNO was present, so some of the heavyweights from UMNO, such as its Deputy President Mat Hassan, to be, for example, Deputy Prime Minister, and perhaps an important portfolio to go with that, ministerial portfolio, I think that would be ideal. And then you have some of these, by now old faces from the previous PH administration, such as Anthony Locke from DAP. And then you would need to include, for example, some figures from East Malaysia as well.
Now, this sort of indicates, a new era in Malaysian politics. And, with the Pakatan Harapan team at the fore, do you see that it's going to be less race-based politics from here on for Malaysia?
Well, I think Anwar Ibrahim in particular and Pakatan Harapan in general would, of course, like to present a more multicultural outlook for Malaysia, where all Malaysians could rally around the administration, as I said, to revive the economy. But let us also not forget, in the just concluded election, there's a substantial amount of Malaysians who perhaps see race and religion as the defining factor for them to cast their votes. And thereby you saw, for example, the PAS party expanded its numbers quite significantly as well. So how could he reconcile these two cohorts of Malaysians? I think that would be his main political challenge, to make sure that those who are more progressive and multiculturally minded would be able to work with those who are perhaps more conservative in their political and social outlook. Yeah.
And, Dr. Oh, it also seems that this entire political deadlock was broken by a royal decree. The king, the sultans, it seems unprecedented that they had to play a major role here this time round. And what do you read into it? And what does it mean for future elections?
Well, actually, the royalty has played a significant role, not only in this particular choosing of the Prime Minister, but during Sheraton move and also last year as well, because the political landscape in Malaysia is very fragmented nowadays. No single party or coalition could command an outright parliamentary majority. Therefore, it necessitates the king to play a more proactive role to see constitutionally, which particular leader is most likely to command a majority. And we have a very thorough and very methodical king. So he would make sure that, for example, the major party or major coalitions leaders and also sometimes even individual MPs interviewed and such that he could ascertain their support for which particular leader. That's why the process, it's a bit long. Yeah.
Doctor, I just want to just verify something. I mean, we have been getting news, rather comments from former Prime Minister Muhyiddin Yassin, basically challenging Prime Minister Anwar to prove that he has a majority of 112 seats in Parliament. And because Muhyiddin himself says that he believes he has the support of 115 MPs in Parliament. I mean, him making, making this comment at this point, where is he expecting to go with it?
Well, the king has appointed Anwar, and Anwar has been sworn in. So Anwar will be Prime Minister, I think, at least until, as I said, the tabling of the budget in Parliament, because a budget vote is traditionally considered a vote of confidence. If Anwar tables his budget and that budget passes, that means he has the confidence of the House and he could continue as Prime Minister. Well, Muhyiddin could pull out his, all his supporters during that budgetary vote, if he would like to show that instead he has the majority.
Yeah, always good speaking with you. Thanks very much for your time, Dr. Yassin, Senior Fellow at the Singapore Institute of International Affairs. Still ahead on Asia Now, as elections in Taiwan loom closer, we explore the growing discontent some supporters have with the nation's ruling party.
We are standing together with a lot of giants around the world.
Big breakthroughs.
Heart regeneration is the ultimate goal of treating heart failure.
Come with big challenges.
We're worried this abnormal liver function test may actually be a side effect of the study drug.
How did some of the brightest minds behind groundbreaking studies on heart disease overcome their obstacles? Rediscovering the heart. Tonight on CNA.
Brought to you by the Yong Lu Lin School of Medicine, National University of Singapore.
The 20th Party Congress. Xi Jinping has secured an unprecedented third term as president.
China will be more united and more stable than ever before.
Some people say up to 80% of the people support him.
But can his popularity at home translate on the global stage?
The back of the world will be very much fed up with China's warrior diplomacy.
The next 5 years of Xi, Insight, tonight on CNA.
World Tonight, daily on CNA.
Gardens by the Bay was my retirement project.
From a dream 10 years ago.
When we first looked at the designs itself, we were wondering, is it going to be a spectacular failure?
To the vision today.
I think it is also symbolic of Singapore itself to create something on a site that was formerly reclaimed land.
An endeavor that took belief and passion.
We understood that we have a calling and we love nature and we wanted to share this with the rest of the world.
I like that we're able to bring people on a journey without even leaving Singapore.
It also will help to raise awareness in the importance of conservation.
Does this beat like being in a classroom?
Yeah. Inside our Gardens by the Bay, 26 November, Saturday on CNA.
There's a residential fire. We decided we will do pro bono for this family and help them get back on their feet.
January has been a slow month so far. When's the next function happening?
In 2 days' time.
2 days' time. Okay, awesome.
What's happening today is a deep cleaning of our carpets in our function room.
When it comes to fire loss or restoration loss, we try to help out in every way we can.
Good to have you back on Asia Now. A historic moment for Anwar Ibrahim, who has just been sworn in as Malaysia's 10th Prime Minister. His Pakatan Harapan coalition won 82 seats in last Saturday's election, short of the 112 needed to form a government. The King played a central role in breaking the political impasse, announcing Mr Anwar's appointment after meeting his fellow rulers. Mr Anwar will address the media soon and, of course, we'll be bringing it to you live as soon as that happens. In other news, Taiwan's ruling Democratic Progressive Party, or DPP, faces an uphill battle in the upcoming local elections. In the second part of a three-part series, Victoria Jen explores the growing discontent towards the DPP over the slowing economy and escalating tensions across the Taiwan Strait.
The strong support here for Kuomintang mayoral candidate Jiang Wan'an would have been unimaginable just months ago. That's because this area, Huanghe South Road Integrated Market in central Taipei, was considered to be a stronghold of the ruling Democratic Progressive Party. But today, Mr. Zhang is leading in the polls. Lin Shendong is one of his supporters. Like many others here, the 55-year-old has switched his support from the DPP as he's unhappy with the government's strong stance towards Beijing.
百姓是希望说大家都是和平共处啦，以经济优先呐，每个国家不管每个国家都不喜欢战争呐，因为战争呢对谁都不好啦，尤其是我们百姓，我们百姓只求温饱。 也不用就和平共处，干嘛有什么抗中保台呢？对不对？和平共处就好了啦。
In fact, the slowing economy is front and foremost in these vendors' minds.
重点是要拼一下经济的啦，不是老是在喊口号，喊什么选举之类的啦。这个民生要来基层走一走，才知道大家过得很苦了。
对，为百姓多着想，不要为了他们的利益在那边争取，百姓都没有在顾，这样我觉得这样不好。
Insiders from the DPP have estimated that support for them in the area has gone down from 70% to less than 40%. And this could foretell woes at the polls for them across the island. Taiwanese political opinion tracker Daily View has projected that the KMT could win 15 out of 22 mayoral and county magistrate seats, while the ruling DPP could win just 5. This as cross-strait relations grow increasingly tense. In early August, China launched its largest ever military exercises around the island, following U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit. The drill had made more than 70% Taiwanese feel that the chances of a military confrontation across the strait have increased considerably, according to a recent poll. The DPP's tactic of highlighting Beijing's threat proved successful in the 2020 presidential race when it won a landslide victory. But with cross-strait tensions rising, analysts say such fiery rhetoric against Beijing could turn voters off.
那么这个演习对台湾人民来讲，他更是直接感受得到。另外，刚好乌克兰战争也爆发，就是乌克兰血淋淋的那个战场的那个感受有没有？透过电视的传播，老百姓他基本上从画面里面，他可以推想到，一旦台湾也面临同样的局面的话，台湾会发生什么状况？
With tensions on the rise, Beijing has imposed trade sanctions against some agricultural, fishery, and bakery products from Taiwan, raising concerns among the public.
大陆对于农渔业产品的这种封锁哈，其实对选民来讲的话是非常大的一个打击，特别是中南部的一个选民。
所以也会影响到他们。
这也会影响到他们这个投票的行为。
Taiwan's local elections are usually a chance for voters to show their dissatisfaction with the party in power. But with President Tsai Ing-wen required to step down at the end of her current term, the results could reshape the political landscape for 2024, when the presidential and legislative yuan elections will be held. Victoria Jen, CNA, Taipei.
China's daily COVID-19 cases have climbed to a new record high since the start of the pandemic nearly 3 years ago. More than 31,000 new infections were detected in the last 24 hours, a jump from yesterday's tally. The figure also exceeds the previous peak in April, and that has sparked concern about tougher restrictions. Several cities are resorting to tightening controls in a bid to curb transmission. Officials have ordered a lockdown in Zhengzhou City, home to a vast iPhone factory, starting midnight local time. Such measures are fueling discontent among residents and employees, especially at Apple supplier Foxconn's main plant, where violence erupted as workers clashed with security personnel over COVID curbs, living conditions, and a delay in payments. Foxconn confirmed the unrest, saying it will communicate with employees and the government to avoid a repeat of the violence. The firm has also apologized for a technical error in its payment systems after the violent protests that erupted over salaries and conditions. Reports say it has offered each newly hired worker some 10,000 yuan, or about $1,400, in a desperate attempt to get protesters to leave the campus and end the violence. The flare-up highlights the dilemma China faces in keeping its zero-COVID policy and maintaining normal production. Foxconn has had to maintain tough and rigid controls and keep production at peak operating levels at the same time. Meanwhile, Beijing reported more than 1,600 new local cases in the past 24 hours, prompting it to tighten control on those entering and leaving the capital. Residents have been told to stay put, while schools in several districts have shut and in-person teaching suspended. Those entering public areas such as malls and government buildings will need proof of a negative COVID test result done within 48 hours. Other mega cities like Chongqing and Guangzhou have also been placed under lockdown. Well, Shanghai will tighten rules for those entering the city from today. Fresh arrivals in the city will be barred from entering restaurants and malls for 5 days. But residents can still go to offices and use public transport. But Japan have pulled off a major upset, beating Germany in an enthralling Group E opener in Qatar. The Germans, though, started off strong, taking the lead from the spot after Japan's goalkeeper fouled fullback David Rom in the box. Now, UK Gundogan bearing the resulting penalty in the 33rd minute. But the Samurai Blue struck back in the second half, equalising first through German-based forward Ritsu Doan in the 75th minute. Another substitute, Takuma Asano, streaked away 8 minutes later to nab the winner in a historic 2-1 victory for Japan. But it is Spain that will top Group E after a statement performance against Costa Rica. Now, La Rioja cementing their biggest ever World Cup victory. The Spaniards were ahead 3-0 within the first half hour. Goals from Dani Olmo, Marco Asensio, and a Ferran Torres penalty. Spain piled on even more goals after the break. Torres again on target before Javi made it 5. Spain kept the match with 2 more goals over a hapless Costa Rica. Right, look now at the standings so far. Spain leading Group E, while Belgium is at the top of Group F. Croatia and Morocco tied at second and third after a goalless draw. And of course, you can catch all 64 matches of the FIFA World Cup Qatar 2022 live and on demand on MeWatch. Still ahead on Asia Now, we are going to be checking the top stories, including Malaysia finally has a prime minister after Saturday's inconclusive elections. Pakatan Harapan's Anwar Ibrahim is sworn in today.
Anticipation is rising, and so is the atmosphere. Are you ready? The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Our time on Earth is short. but our impact will be felt for generations to come. The time is now to change the way we live.
I'm a chef on a mission to cut out food waste in your kitchen.
To meet our needs and the needs of the future. Join us on this mission to make sustainability a part of our lives. Every Friday, exclusively on CNA. Next time on Japan Hour.
人気のラーメン完食してその食材を当てろいただきますせーのトリュフ名物水筒を作り一人一杯味わえよし嬉しいめちゃくちゃうまい山のグテースイエス激うまのつれ
Japan Hour, Saturday on CNA. Japan Hour is brought to you by Sumitomo Corporation and Zip Air winter fares are now available. This is Asia Now.
Hello there, it's 6 p.m. in Singapore and Kuala Lumpur. I'm Oteli Edwards. At this hour, Malaysia finally has a Prime Minister. Anwar Ibrahim, less than an hour into the top job, and the Pakatan Harapan leader sworn in at the palace. A big step in ending a political impasse following last Saturday's general election that left no coalition with enough seats to form a government.
Anwar Ibrahim has been called Malaysia's longest Prime Minister in waiting. I'm Melissa Goa outside the National Palace in Kuala Lumpur, where the swearing-in ceremony has just ended.
I'm Afifah Arifin, standing by live at a clubhouse here in Kajang, Selangor, where Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim will be addressing the media after he leaves the National Palace.
And Malaysian Equity is giving their thumping support to the new Prime Minister and the ending of the political impasse. The benchmark KLCI rallying more than 4% with a 2% gain on the local currency against the US dollar. The ringgit, the best performer in Asia.
Plus, from Finance Minister to prisoner and now Malaysia's Prime Minister. We look back at the ups and downs of Mr Anwar's long political career. Anwar Ibrahim has been sworn in as Malaysia's 10th Prime Minister.
Anwar bin Ibrahim setelah dilantik memegang jawatan seorang Perdana Menteri. Kewajipan saya.
The King played a central role in breaking the political impasse, announcing Mr Anwar's appointment after meeting his fellow rulers. His Pakatan Harapan coalition won 82 seats in last Saturday's election, short of the 112 needed to form a government. Well, CNA's Melissa Goh joins us live from Istana Negara in Kuala Lumpur, where Anwar Ibrahim was just sworn in as the country's Prime Minister. That was earlier. Now, Melissa, Anwar Ibrahim, he's now expected to meet the press after his swearing-in ceremony earlier. What do you think he's going to be talking about?
You know, Anwar is not out of the palace yet. The photo session is going on. Lots to talk about among MPs from Pakatan Harapan as well as leaders from the new coalition partners. Perikatan Nasional Chairman Ahmad Zaid Hamidi and his deputy Muhammad Hassan as well. They were in the throne room earlier for the swearing-in ceremony. Also present were leaders from Sabah and Sarawak-based parties. Now, serious photo session is going on inside the palace. I would assume it's historic, not because Anwar was called the longest prime minister in waiting and his quest to helm the top job, in over 2 decades. But it's a first in a country that two coalitions, Pakatan Harapan and Perikatan Nasional, has been at loggerheads all these while at the opposite end of things, and suddenly they're coming together to form a unity government. It's indeed seeing is believing. I'm sure Anwar will be talking about that too.
Right. So, Mel, so just to confirm that Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim is still in the palace. He has not made his way to the clubhouse for the media conference just yet. Well, let's talk about cabinet appointment, though. That's going to be a big one. You know, challenges that Anwar could face in appointing members, assuring that he has to maintain unity, he has to make sure that there is a balance. Any indication on what the cabinet will look like?
Well, if you look at the previous Pakatan Harapan administration led by Dr. Mahathir Mohamad, back then the cabinet positions were shared equally in proportion among the coalition partners. But this round may be different because the number of portfolios, the cabinet positions, may be in accordance to the number of seats that they each won. So he may have more than one deputy prime minister to placate all sides. It's really a tricky situation because he's hard-pressed as well to rein in the size of the cabinet. Now, he's been complaining about the previous administration under Perikatan Nasional and Barisan Nasional being so big, right? Let's see how he can do better. Now, he said that he won't accept the pay of the Prime Minister or MP. So let's see how he rein in the spending at the same time, increase our fiscal consolidation and towards balancing the budget.
That's right, a budget, that's a big one. Thanks very much, Melissa Goh, speaking to us live from Kuala Lumpur. Well, CNA's Afifa Arifin joins us live from Kajang, Selangor, where, Afifa, we just heard from Mel that the Anwar Ibrahim hasn't left the palace yet. He's still busy taking photographs, but he will be addressing the media after being sworn in as Prime Minister, where you are at.
That's right. So we're still waiting for him here. This is the first place that he will go to right after he leaves the palace, this clubhouse in Kajang, Selangor, which is just a stone's throw away from his house in Sungai Long. Right now, we have so many members of the media gathered here, but we also have a lot of supporters coming into the hall from the neighboring residential estates in this area. People are just coming in, eagerly anticipating the arrival of Malaysia's 10th Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim. Now, we know that his appointment as Prime Minister has ended 5 days of political crisis. It's unprecedented. And at the same time, you know, his supporters, of course, are over the moon with that announcement simply because they have been waiting for a very long time for him to become Prime Minister. We know that Pakatan Harapan leaders were also seen at his house earlier, but they have also urged caution and asked the supporters to remain calm. PKR's Deputy President Rafizi Ramli has asked his supporters not to have any gatherings or celebrations in order to risk, inciting any sort of provocations. In similar tone with DAP, who's asked its members not to hold gatherings or vehicle convoys. Its Secretary General Anthony Lok said that the government that will be formed will be a coalition government that involves various political parties. You know, we also spoke to a lot of people on the ground earlier, asking them how they felt about Anwar Ibrahim's appointment as Prime Minister. They told us that they want stability and for him to revive the economy, something that he's promised throughout his campaign. Let's have a listen to what they told us.
All right. I am a full supporter of Anwar Ibrahim. So I'm very happy. I mean, my family are very happy. My children are very happy.
What do you want his government to give?
Every race. Malay, Chinese, Indian, everybody. We want good government.
I think Malaysia will be changing. Definitely will be our economy will be boost after this. That's all. I'm happy he win that. He win this election and became elected as the Prime Minister. Very happy. Yeah, I stand for unity. So what do you hope that him as the Prime Minister, what do you hope he can do for the country? Unity, and of course bring back the economy, state stability, and Malaysia will rise again.
For me, I have no problem as long as the Malay is dibela lah. Maksudnya kita tak nak ada kesusahan pada orang Melayu lah. Saya lebih ke risau pasal tu je lah, because there's a PH, right? PH dia bekerjasama dengan DAP kan. So itu je lah orang Melayu punya kebimbangan. Kalau tak ada apa-apa gangguan ataupun kesusahan untuk orang Melayu, I'm okay.
So for Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, of course, his task is to revive the economy as well as calming down ethnic tensions which have flared since Saturday's results. Now, we just heard that he will be leaving the palace very shortly. We're all here. The media's all gathered. We'll have many, many questions for him. We'll bring you all the updates when we have them.
All right, well, we'll leave you to that. Thanks very much, Afifa Arifin, speaking to us live from Kajang, Selangor. A long-held dream to be Malaysia's Prime Minister finally comes true for Anwar Ibrahim. He was on the cusp of becoming the country's premier, but was twice brought down by sodomy and corruption convictions. Now, Anwar was imprisoned for years, but he never gave up on his quest to redefine Malaysian politics. Chan Yu Yim has the story.
75-year-old Anwar Ibrahim has served as the leader of the opposition and chairman of Pakatan Harapan since 2020. He started his political career as a founder of youth organisation Angkatan Belia Islam Malaysia. After joining UMNO, the major party in the long-time ruling Barisan Nasional coalition, he held several high-profile cabinet positions in the 1980s and 1990s. He was Deputy Prime Minister of Malaysia from 1993 to 1998 and was Finance Minister from 1991 to 1998. However, he was removed from all posts by Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad in September 1998. Anwar was jailed in April 1999 after a trial for sodomy and corruption that was criticized by human rights groups and several foreign governments. He was released in 2004 after his conviction was overturned. Anwar was the leader of the opposition from 2008 to 2015 and united the opposition parties, which unsuccessfully campaigned in the 2008 and 2013 elections. He was sentenced to another 5 years imprisonment after a second sodomy conviction in 2015. While still in prison, Anwar rejoined Mahathir under new coalition Pakatan Harapan in absentia, which went on to win the 2018 general election. Mahathir outlined a plan for Anwar to take over from himself as Prime Minister after an unspecified interim period. A few days after the election, Anwar received a royal pardon from the king and was released from prison. He soon made a comeback as a backbencher MP after winning the 2018 Port Dickson by-election. Anwar became the leader of the opposition in May 2020 after the collapse of the PH coalition.
And for markets' reaction to Malaysia's political developments, Roland, over to you.
Thanks, Oteli. Yes, Malaysian stocks rallying to a 3-month high today as investors cheer the end of days of uncertainty. The benchmark KLCI closing out the session with a 4% jump. The Malaysian ringgit also gaining up as well, more than 1.8% higher against the US dollar. $1 now changing hands for 4 ringgit 48 cents apiece. Gaming and brewery companies, including Genting Malaysia, Sports Toto, Magnum and Carlsberg Brewery, all jumping as well. The so-called vice stocks are back in favour with investors as uncertainty over the new government is over. Now, Anwar's administration expected to be more liberal and reform-oriented. And I'll be back shortly with more business updates, including China's biggest bank, the latest to swoop in with an offer of 91 billion in credit to the cash-strapped property developers. And later, South Korean truckers kick off a second mass walkout within 6 months, threatening to disrupt manufacturing and fuel supplies for a range of industries.
Climate change affecting our elephants across Asia.
कि हम 6th mass extinction की तरफ बहुत तेजी से बढ़ रहे हैं.
There's a pile of plastics accumulating in this deepest part of the country.
Marine turtles often mistake floating plastic as a marine animal.
We are standing together with a lot of giants around the world.
Big breakthroughs.
Heart regeneration is the ultimate goal of treating heart failure.
Come with big challenges.
We were worried this abnormal liver function test may actually be a side effect of the study drug.
How did some of the brightest minds behind groundbreaking studies on heart disease overcome their obstacles? Rediscovering the Heart. Tonight on CNA.
Brought to you by the Yong Lu Lin School of Medicine, National University of Singapore.
The 20th Party Congress. Xi Jinping has secured an unprecedented third term as president.
China will be more united and more stable than ever before.
Some people say up to 80% of the people support him.
But can his popularity at home translate on the global stage?
The back of the world will be very much fed up with China's warrior diplomacy.
The next 5 years of Xi, Insight, tonight on CNA.
Protesters continue to demand changes.
We are not allowed to exit the compound.
Villages are bracing for more floods ahead.
At least 10,000 people have come to Democracy Monument.
The real perspective into the day's news. Asia Tonight, daily on CNA.
Gardens by the Bay was my retirement project.
From a dream 10 years ago.
When we first looked at the designs itself, we were wondering, is it going to be a spectacular failure?
To the vision today.
I think it is also symbolic of Singapore itself to create something on a site that was formerly reclaimed land.
An endeavor that took belief and passion.
We understood that we have a calling and we love nature and we wanted to share this with the rest of the world.
I like that we're able to bring people on a journey without even leaving Singapore.
It also will help to raise awareness in the importance of conservation.
Does this beat like being in a classroom?
Yeah. Inside our Gardens by the Bay, 26 November, Saturday on CNA.
Hello again. You are watching Asia Now here on CNA. It's time for a business update with Roland.
Hello again. The Industrial and Commercial Bank of China, the country's biggest lender by assets, says it will provide at least $91 billion in credit to 12 property developers. Well, this is the latest in a series of coordinated efforts by China's 5 biggest state-owned banks, taking the total funds available to the property sector to nearly $130 billion. They will augment recent support measures to ease the cash crunch in the sector. Property developers, including industry giants like Vanke and Country Garden, have been named as those getting the credit support. Now, banks are making efforts to follow a regulatory call to bolster the sector. But most of the new loans will go to state-backed developers, with analysts pointing out that the private developers are still struggling. Policy priority has been placed on supporting the bigger and better developers. Now, Beijing has been stepping up measures in recent weeks to support the property sector, which has been hit by a debt crisis. Now, Chinese developers jumping on the announcement. China Vanke was up 3.4%, Country Garden up by a sterling 20%, Greentown China also up nearly 10% today. The COVID flare-ups affecting market sentiment in the Greater China region, of course. Benchmark indices moving in a tight range amid cautious trade. The Shanghai Composite ended down the day, down 0.25%. Shenzhen Component also down by 0.2%. Now, those COVID-19 related shares, though, COVID test producers as well as pharma companies did move higher. Property stocks also boosted sentiment there. Over in Hong Kong, the Hang Seng is up 0.8%, shored up by property stocks as well as some of those big tech names leading the gains. Now, Vietnam, too, is struggling to come out of a real estate credit crunch triggered by a regulatory crackdown. The government's sweeping probe on corruption in the corporate bond market has landed heavily on Vietnam's real estate developers. Now, it appears the worst may not yet be over. Shares of real estate developer Nova Land and Phat Tat both closed in the red, marking at least 17 consecutive days of declines. As you can see, Nova Land there down nearly 7%, 23,600 baht, as well as Phat Tat also down by about the same margin. The benchmark VN index rose 0.2% at the close. It has plunged 37% this year, driven by developers and banks amid fears of a wider contagion. The corruption probe has pummeled domestic debt sales and turned local stocks into the world's worst performing major benchmark. The country's finance minister has pledged to ease funding woes for builders, but investors remain concerned about the sector's repayment pressure. Now, analysts say the crackdown could lead to a liquidity crunch, which could have repercussions on the broader property and banking sectors. South Korea's central bank has returned to its usual slow pace of policy tightening at its final rate-setting meeting this year. The move aims to battle inflation without weighing on economic growth and exacerbating credit risks. The Bank of Korea raised the key 7-day repurchase rate by a modest 25 basis points to 3.25%, and that's in line with market expectations. The BOK delivered 2 half-point hikes this year as it sought to keep pace with the U.S. Federal Reserve's rapid rate rises. The smaller margin of the increase reflects the central bank's concern that higher rates may aggravate the strain on households that have built up record debt and tip the economy into recession. Meanwhile, the country's widening trade deficit coupled with the Fed's sharp tightening have weighed on the Korean won, which has fallen to a 13-year low last month. And this has fueled inflation further in the country, which has edged up to 5.7% in October. Now, still in South Korea, unionized truckers have kicked off a nationwide strike. The second in less than 6 months, the strike is stoking worries over supply disruptions amid post-pandemic recovery efforts. The organizing union kicked off 16 rallies across the country, including at the port of Ulsan that houses Hyundai's main manufacturing plant. Now, the union estimated some 22,000 took part in the rallies, while the Transport Ministry says about 10,000 people attended. The truckers are calling on the government to make a minimum pay system that's due to expire at the end of the year permanent. They're also pushing for the expansion of benefits for truckers in other industries, including oil tankers. The government has agreed to extend the scheme for 3 years, but rejected other union demands. The unions have warned that the strike could stop oil supplies at major refineries and transportation at major ports and industrial plants. The earlier 8-day strike back in June resulted in massive delays of cargo shipments, costing more than $1.2 billion in lost output and unmet deliveries. The markets in Asia-Pacific rising after the U.S. Federal Reserve signaled a switch to smaller rate hikes soon. The KLCI, of course, leading the advance in the region at a 3-month high. The Nikkei 225 back from a break yesterday, also adding 1%. Kospi also up after the rate decision, and most large caps were rising there today. In Sydney, the ASX 200 adding gains for the third straight session, the highest close since May, and sentiment supported by mining and tech counters. Quick check on the currencies. Now, the dollar index, which measures the greenback against the 6 major peers, well, that's down 0.34%. It's at 105.71. And we're seeing also the Japanese yen and the Korean won strengthening against the US dollar. Japanese yen, $1 US changing hands for 138.31 yen right now. Sri Lanka sounded an optimistic note over its talks with creditors. Chief Central Bank Dalal Weerasinghe said that they are progressing well and that the country will get assurances from the creditors soon. He added that it wouldn't be a big deal if Sri Lanka missed next month's target to reach an agreement with the International Monetary Fund, as the country could go to the board back in January. Now, the country's finances can be managed for another couple of months, he says. Still, in the long term, Sri Lanka must cut its deficit and curb import demand. In a separate statement, the central bank threatened to intervene to control high interest rates. And this would mean cutting the rates, in turn lowering the government's borrowing costs. The nation has been struggling with soaring inflation, partly triggered by its worst financial crisis in 7 decades. A shortage of foreign exchange reserves to pay for imports has worsened inflation and triggered a sharp currency depreciation. The central bank decided to hold its 2 policy rates steady today, as expected. The release of the Pokemon titles helping Japanese video game maker Nintendo set sales records domestically and globally. 2 of its newly released Pokemon games scored 10 million sales internationally in the first 3 days alone. Now, that's Nintendo's biggest debut on any platform. Now, more than 4 million units were sold in Japan, also setting a new domestic record. Now, such big game launches helped Nintendo's 5-year Switch console maintain momentum for its software and hardware sales. Analysts say that the hardcore fans of the Pokemon franchise are willing to look past the product's performance problems. But the entertainment giant has offered cautious forecasts for the year ahead. Last month, Nintendo sliced off 10% of its projection for console sales this fiscal year, citing prolonged shortages in chip supply. And shares of the Japanese firm was up by as much as 1.9%. Today, after the announcement, it closed in the green, though paring off some of those gains. And you're up to date with the business headlines, so tell you.
%70 of the world's population will be living in urban areas by 2050. That's according to the United Nations. That means the need for efficient and environmentally friendly smart cities is more critical than ever. But the world's biggest economy is lagging behind Europe and Southeast Asia. There are no American cities in the top 10 of the most recent Smart City Index. Kate Fisher reports from Columbus, Ohio, once billed as America's pioneering smart city.
With innovative technology on roadsides and inside cars, the Columbus region of Ohio considers itself pretty smart. In 2016, it beat 77 other small and mid-sized US cities to win a $50 million grant to turn itself into America's smartest city.
We're embracing new technologies in a way that we were not having conversations about 5 years ago. We have a fluency about electric vehicles and have done systems planning around EV charging, autonomous vehicles, all because of this grant. And so our community is way smarter than we were when we started.
But according to the Global Smart City Index, not enough to get on its list, which is topped by Singapore.
East Asia has exploded in population growth far faster than European or American markets. They've had to figure out how to house all those people in small places. So you see this when you spend time in Tokyo or in Singapore, that they're just making better use of advanced technology, because it's not just digital tech, it's any kind of tech that can get more people in close places.
The Columbus region has become a living lab for just this technology, while also making life smarter for residents like John Wall. His car's being fitted with a sensor which will interact with the roadside units in his hometown.
Well, it's amazing that a town Marysville size even got involved. I think is really cool, and that I'm just glad to be involved.
Further along what's known as the Smart Mobility Corridor in the suburb of Dublin, they can gather data in higher traffic areas like a multi-lane roundabout.
So an RSU, which is called the roadside unit, and the cameras will be at the traffic signal and at the roundabout.
And this is the data it's gathering.
Street sensors and cameras are helping to make this the smartest place in America.
Those driving the project say the sky's the limit.
Dublin aspires to be the most connected community in the United States. We mean that on many different levels. We mean that in terms of transportation. We mean that in terms of smart mobility. We also mean that in terms of innovative technologies that connect people, and where it goes is really limited to the human imagination.
And there's an abundance of that at the Center for Automotive Research at Ohio State University.
We're very, very focused on helping the country and the world switch to clean and efficient propulsion systems. The technology is sort of accepted now, and we're in the mass rollout. So there's a tremendous amount of work as we go from concepts that we knew could work to really getting those out in masses, seeing the problems in the field, and helping to continue to innovate the technologies.
The city of Columbus may not feature in the top world rankings when it comes to being smart, but the region is confident it is going places. Kate Fisher, CNA, Columbus, Ohio.
Still ahead on Asia Now, the European Union is pressing ahead with the 9th sanctions package amid Moscow's attacks on Kyiv's energy infrastructure. And later, Rescue operations continue in Indonesia after a massive earthquake in West Java claimed nearly 300 lives.
Biodiversity is booming, which is inviting for some local foragers and farmers who embrace edible wildlife.
We're the largest organic banana grower in Singapore.
This is a jam.
Amazing. So the mulberries are from the garden.
No, that's delicious.
Singapore is ramping up conservation efforts locally and across the region.
I really do love reptiles and finding out about them, so I really love my job.
Building must relate to the lives of the people.
目前还是一直要创新一些新的东西。我也不希望是人家把我看作是80岁的人。
There are those who dare to be different, who have made their mark in Singapore and beyond.
You have such big dreams, you want to change the world with your art.
Obviously, every fighter wants to win, so all you can do is to prepare yourself to win.
This December, redefine old norms and explore fresh new beginnings. Asia's greatest civilizations unearth the root of their rise and fall. A brand new season of The Mark of Empire. North Korean defectors turn social media celebrities. A new generation redefining its history from North Korea with love. Former inmates face up to the realities of the outside world. Don't miss the follow-up to the highly acclaimed documentary series, Beyond Maximum Security, this December on CNA. Pick up a new and unique hobby on your next trip to Gangnam. Try new things, such as personal training and carpentry class for the ladies, or manicures and ballet classes for the guys. Discover a new side of yourself. Gangnam Insiders Picks, Sunday on CNA. This program is brought to you by the Gangnam-gu office.
There's a residential fire. We decided we will do pro bono for this family and help them get back on their feet.
January has been a slow month so far. When's the next function happening?
In 2 days' time.
2 days' time. Okay, awesome.
What's happening today is a deep cleaning of our carpets in our function room.
When it comes to a fire loss or restoration loss, we try to help out in every way we can.
Updating this hour's top stories. Malaysia finally has a Prime Minister, the Pakatan Harapan leader, sworn in at the palace. A big step in ending a political impasse following last Saturday's general election that left no coalition with enough seats to form a government. And we are standing by for Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim to address the media less than an hour into the top job. Plus, from Finance Minister to prisoner, and now Malaysia's Prime Minister. We look back on the ups and downs of Mr Anwar's long political career. Anwar Ibrahim has just been sworn in as Malaysia's 10th Prime Minister. His Pakatan Harapan coalition won 82 seats in last Saturday's election, short of the 112 needed to form a government. Well, the King played a central role in breaking the political impasse, announcing Mr Anwar's appointment after meeting his fellow rulers. Mr Anwar will address the media soon, and we will bring it to you live as soon as that happens. Well, in the meantime, let's bring in Dr. Francis Hutchinson. He joins us live now. He's a senior fellow and coordinator at the Malaysia Studies Program in ISIS Yusof Ishak Institute. Dr. Hutchinson, thanks for joining us today. We're also getting news that, the Gabungan Party Sarawak, GPS, will be joining the unity government, which is going to be led by Anwar Ibrahim. We've heard, BN and PN making that flip-flop and that U-turn. How do you see this heralding a new era of Malaysian politics? Do you think that they are ready to start afresh?
I don't know about starting afresh, but what I think that is key is that the monarch, the king, as well as the council of rulers have come together, and they kind of have two things that they're looking for in any type of coalition that is coming out of this current impasse. And the first thing is that it needs to be a representative coalition. So it needs to have significant representation from the Malay community, from the non-Malay community, from East Malaysia, and from West Malaysia. So that is the first consideration. So everybody feels included, nobody feels left out. The second consideration is that they are looking for a stable and convincing majority. So if we go back to 2018, of course, we had that period until 2020, but then we had 2020, and then since then it's really been a lot of mathematical calculations. Is there a coalition? Is there not coalition? A majority? Are we going to have a stable ruling government? So I think the idea is now we want to get whatever coalition is in power substantially past that 112 mark, so that then we can focus on governing, look at reactivating the economy, and not having to consistently worry about the government falling apart.
You're touching on those numbers. As a matter of fact, Muhyiddin Yassin, he's still insisting, though, that he has the support of 115 lawmakers, which is more than the simple majority of seats in a parliament needed to form the parliament. Just trying to get an understanding of what will Perikatan Nasional do now that PH's Anwar Ibrahim is Prime Minister? What is his game plan here?
So I think this is now difficult because prior, of course, to the swearing in, when there was a little bit of flux, it is possible to get statutory declarations and then to go to the Agong and make the, argument, look, I've got a majority. But the problem with statutory declarations is that people can make more than one, and you don't have an idea of when it was made, so you could indeed have duplicates. The other thing is mathematically it didn't work if we accept that Barisan Nasional was staying together as one entity. There just weren't enough numbers. I think this is what led the Agong to then doubt that. And then, of course, there's the last thing, which is if you really do want a representative government, then if it's just a sort of very solid block with PN, potentially some East Malaysians, there are still vast sectors of society that are not included.
We're also getting word that Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim has just left the palace. He will be making way to the club to be giving his first press conference as Malaysia's Prime Minister. We'll have that for you in a while. But back to you again, Dr. Hutchinson. We're talking about BN. They initially insisted on being the opposition and not backing any coalition, but the king has decreed that it must back the unity government. So as you talked about, one of the important things about how the coalition has to be representative, how East Malaysia and West Malaysia, how we're going to gel everyone together. What parties or coalitions do you think the opposition will be made up now?
So the opposition, I think, of course, Perikatan Nasional, so PN, so we would have Bersatu, would have PAS, and then potentially some smaller parties with individual MPs. But the latest news that I have is on the other side, of course, the governing coalition. Of course, we have PH, Pakatan Harapan, we have BN, you've mentioned GPS from Sarawak, and there's also discussion that GRS from Sabah would also be part. So then you've got all four parts of, all the four different communities and different parts of the country together.
Now, Dr. Hutchinson, last night's UMNO Supreme Council meeting resulted in members unanimously supporting Zahid Hamidi to remain as a party's president. How can he still retain support after BN's defeat in the general election? Or is that part of what the carrots that was being dangled to him?
Sure. So I think, he needs to look at the panorama, and certainly it's a lot better of an argument to have that, yes, we lost, but we're still part of the governing coalition. I think this is a much better selling point, and something that when he comes to contest in the upcoming UMNO party election, which should take place by April next year, this will be something that he can basically show. Nonetheless, I think it is possible that he will be contested, and it is also possible that he lose. because, of course, number one, there is the important precedent of both Abdullah Badawi as well as Najib Razak resigning in the wake of not very good performances at the urns. And then there is also the question of, his legal issues. And then third, there is the question that UMNO doesn't seem to be particularly united at this point in time. And there are people that would want to ally with PN. So it is possible that 6 months down the road that we'd be having other discussions as to the composition of the ruling coalition. But 6 months is a long time in politics.
That's right, and the constant twists and turns in Malaysia especially. Now, it seems like this political deadlock, right, was only broken by royal decree. That was what it came down to. It shows the king's huge role, which was rather unprecedented, and also he had to consult with the sultans and etc. So do you see that is where it's going for future elections for Malaysia, that, whenever it comes to an impasse like what we just saw?
Yes, so you mentioned the word impasse. So that is really where the head of state, the Agong, plays a role. In a context that we're so used to, where your governing coalition wins 70, 80, even 90% of all seats in parliament, then the need for a ruler, an arbiter, is less necessary. But in contexts like this, and I do suspect that we are going to see more of this going forward, because we've got 3 governing coalitions that are competing with each other. We have narrow parliamentary majorities. We do have instances where it's not clear who is the leader of an expanded coalition. It is in this context that the role of the Agong, or the king, is very, very important as an influencer and as an arbiter. And I do see more of that going forward. So it's not so much that the role has changed, it's more that the context underneath the role has changed.
Very fascinating. And Dr. Hutchinson, I thought I'd let you know that I'm going to be bringing in my colleague from Malaysia now, a Malaysian correspondent, Melissa Goh. She's going to be joining us from the Istana Negara in Kuala Lumpur to join us in this Q&A, and I'm sure she has some questions for you as well. There we go, Melissa.
Hi, Dr. Hutchinson. Always enjoy hearing your views from across the causeway. Now that Anwar is off for his first task ahead, he's going to speak to the media in a moment. What is one question that you would like to ask him?
Well, there are many, but of course, number one, the contours, who is in, who is out. Second question, key priorities. So what's he going to do on day one? And then from there, how is he going to reach out to people that perhaps feel left out? So these 3 things.
Those are very good questions, Dr. Hutchinson. But I just thought I'd add on, because you mentioned, like who's in and who's out. Do you want to sort of paint us a picture of some of the suggested members that will be in?
Are you asking me, or are you asking Melissa?
Right at you, Dr. Hutchinson.
So as we're discussing, it does look like it's going to be those 4. So Pakatan Harapan, and then Barisan Nasional, and then across the sea, GPS and GRS. Another name that we haven't talked about too much is potentially Warisan. They do have 3 MPs. And, in a context where you need to have a rainbow coalition, potentially they could come on. But I was doing the maths, and if we have those 4 coalitions, we already have more than 140 MPs, which is a sizable, solid majority.
And over to you, Melissa. I just thought I would just get your point of view about, do you think that Malaysians now, that they're obviously pleased that there is perhaps some form of stability, but the budget is going to be a big one that's coming up next, and it's going to be, that's going to be a sizable thing sitting on Mr. Anwar's plate?
Well, indeed, without a cabinet, just Anwar alone, he's not going to be able to call for a parliamentary sitting. He has to request first to the king to form a cabinet first and then request to the king to convene a special parliamentary session just to table the budget. Now, the budget 2023 was tabled by the caretaker or the former Prime Minister now, Ismail Sabri. Now he's been rather quiet and that hasn't been passed. Now, he might refine it or amend it or table a new one, it remains to be seen. But he has to get it done quick because it's already December and January. Bills will have to get paid. Civil servants are 1.6 million strong. They need to feed their kids. They need to put food on the table. Many challenges facing Malaysia. The revenue stream. They're talking about bringing back the goods and services tax, but I heard this is not going to be the priority, given that people are still battling high cost of living. Inflation is still a concern, and also commodity prices as well. But in the long run, he has to overhaul and rejig the economy, raise the revenue base. There's so many challenges ahead, and also at the same time, perhaps Mr. Hutchinson, you can give your views with regards. Now, Anwar has promised that he would rather be the longest prime minister in waiting than rather be in a government with the corrupt. But given that a lot of the leaders of the coalition partners, they are still saddled with numerous corruption cases, and more actually will be coming out as we speak. How is he going to ensure his independence, work out a way that there's still transparency and accountability and not get his hands soiled from day one?
Okay, so here we come to cabinet, and actually, can I sneak in one last question to see if you can ask Dato Seri Anwar? So number one, who's going to be Minister of Finance? Number two, who's going to be Minister of Home Affairs? And number three, who's going to be Minister of Defense? So now, back to your question. When it comes down to forming a cabinet, this is going to be very tricky. He's going to have to bring people from 4 coalitions, and within that, different parties within coalitions. So there could be, coming to your point about the economy, a bloated cabinet as you try and increase to have a position to offer everyone. The second point, when you come down to corruption and legal cases, I do suspect that these people will be MPs, but I would be surprised if they're given cabinet positions. So they can be backbenchers, but I don't think that they're going to be cabinet members. Rather, preference will be given to other members of the same party that don't have that type of background.
Which actually sort of brings to mind about Najib Razak. I mean, there was a lot of talk before that, that he still plays a very big role. He was still pulling the strings behind BN. I mean, what's going to happen to him and Zahid Hamidi, who has, dozens of charges?
So, I mean, I think with regard to Najib Razak, what has become very clear is that maybe he's a social media phenomenon, maybe internally within UMNO, he's influential or what, but he did not help bring in any additional support, right? So I think that has been debunked, right? So he, I think, is a relic of the past at this point in time.
What about leaders from Democratic Action Party?
I mean, there could well be the same sort of discussion that if you do have a court case against you, I think in terms of equity and visibility, then, they would need to be consistent. You can be a backbencher, but you're not going to be a cabinet member.
Is there also a sense that, with Pakatan Harapan getting, this number of votes, that perhaps, Malaysia, it's going to be less sort of race-based politics? I mean, it is still going to be a big part, but what I mean is less.
So there, I would look to the structure of the country's parliamentary system. So unfortunately, it is territorially based, and you do have an association with where you live, whether you're in a rural area or an urban area, and what is your ethnicity. And there is a long-standing problem of malapportionment, where certain parts of the country are given outsized influence. And these constituencies tend to be associated with a given ethnic community. Consequently, there is an incentive for politicians to target certain constituencies and talk certain ways. So I do think that this is going to be kind of a permanent issue. The question is, maybe at some point, could there be some form of reform, as you've had other countries that have moved away from a Westminster system to another type of proportional representation? That's one. The other thing is, I think also long term, as you have more Malay voters living in urban areas, this is a driver for another type of debate, because urbanization becomes very, very important to your identity. And then third, also, as we see now with more state governments coming in with different electoral cycles, I think states as an element of people's identity will also become more important. So the question is not to get rid of divisions, but to have more layers of your identity. So it's not simply race.
Okay. Dr. Hutchinson, I have a couple of questions for you. Number one is, do you think he himself, Anwar Ibrahim, will face accusation of nepotism, given that his wife, Wan Aziza, as well as Nurul Izzah, they are all in politics, even though Nurul lost, but Wan Aziza is an MP and is a very senior ranking one in the party. And secondly, how do you think his relationship with Dr. Mahathir, with Muhyiddin, is there going to be a witch hunt after this?
Okay, so first coming to your question about nepotism, I don't know, but what I can tell you is that I think this would be a relatively easy minefield to avoid. So, they have positions within the party, but it doesn't mean necessarily that they need to immediately get cabinet positions. And then we come back to this issue that you have so many different communities and parties that need cabinet positions. So I think this would be relatively easy to avoid. Now, coming to the Anwar and Mahathir relationship, I do think it would be really important and healthy for Malaysia to move beyond that. So I hope that Dato' Sri Anwar can kind of look at other issues. And I think also, Tun Dr. Mahathir has indicated that he has other pursuits now, that he's not going to be at the forefront of politics. So maybe this dynamic will be less important. Now we do come to the dynamic with Tan Sri Muhyiddin, and I think that this will be an important one, of course, because he is the head of an important coalition. And they do go back way back to the 80s. They were the same generation in UMNO. They know each other very well. They were part of the vision team. And I think actually probably their personal dynamic was an element in not having or not being able to forge a coalition sooner or come to some sort of seat-sharing agreement in the run-up to the election. So I hope that cooler heads will prevail and that, strategic imperatives will actually, come to the forefront.
That was really, really insightful. Thanks very much, Dr. Francis Hutchinson, Senior Fellow and Coordinator at the Malaysia Studies Program in ISIS Yusof Ishak Institute. Thank you very much, Mel, as well.
Thanks for having me.
Who is joining us from KL. Well, still ahead on Asia Now. And as elections in Taiwan loom closer, we explore the growing discontent some supporters have with the nation's ruling party.
We are standing together with a lot of giants around the world.
Big breakthroughs.
Heart regeneration is the ultimate goal of treating heart failure.
Come with big challenges.
We're worried this abnormal liver function test may actually be a side effect of the study drug.
How did some of the brightest minds behind groundbreaking studies on heart disease overcome their obstacles? Rediscovering the heart. Tonight on CNA.
Brought to you by the Yong Lu Lin School of Medicine, National University of Singapore.
The 20th Party Congress. Xi Jinping has secured an unprecedented third term as president.
China will be more united and more stable than ever before.
Some people say up to 80% of the people support him.
But can his popularity at home translate on the global stage?
The back of the world will be very much fed up with China's warrior diplomacy.
The next 5 years of Xi, Insight, tonight on CNA.
Can't wait to start my journey to release already.
终于见到你了。
你不是懂他们讲？
还没有。
好了。Okay, gentlemen, today is your big day. We are going to Pre-Release Center for vocational training. I wish you all the best.
Thank you. Thank you.
九二共识是1992年海峡两岸就一个中国原则达成的共识。
蔡英文毁坏了两岸这个共同的政治基础，这个不承认九二共识。
对台湾人民来讲，你一直讲一国两制，可是我一直讲自由民主啊。
Delve into the origins and significance of the 1992 consensus, Sunday on CNA.
When you hear the phrase climate change, this image may come to mind. And you may be thinking, oh no, not again. But wait! Hi, I'm Edward Choi.
And I'm his wife, Jo Tan.
We consider ourselves green warriors, and we want to talk about why so many of us care about climate change. But don't act on it. It comes down to the way our brain works and how often it leads us to make wrong decisions.
So we have errors in our perceptions, and that can be caused by or lead to cognitive biases.
If we use this sort of decision-making in all parts of our life, then we would veer towards making some not-so-good decisions.
Join us as we explore cognitive theories.
Does the coffee cup come into your decision at all? Okay.
And show you how to hack our cognitive biases to start making greener decisions.
Because we are in Singapore, it affects us more.
Who cares about polar bears? 25th November, Friday on CNA.
You're watching Asia Now. Taiwan's ruling Democratic Progressive Party, or DPP, faces an uphill battle in the upcoming local elections. In the second part of a three-part series, Victoria Jen explores the growing discontent towards DPP over the slowing economy and escalating tensions across the Taiwan Strait.
The strong support here for Kuomintang mayoral candidate Jiang Wan-an would have been unimaginable just months ago. That's because this area, Huanghe South Road Integrated Market in central Taipei, was considered to be a stronghold of the ruling Democratic Progressive Party. But today, Mr. Jiang is leading in the polls. Lin Shendong is one of his supporters. Like many others here, the 55-year-old has switched his support from the DPP as he's unhappy with the government's strong stance towards Beijing.
百姓是希望说大家都是和平共处啦，以经济优先呐，每个国家不管每个国家都不喜欢战争呐，因为战争的对谁都不好啦。 尤其是我们百姓，我们百姓只求温饱，也不用就和平共处，干嘛有什么抗中保台呢？对不对？和平共处就好了啦。
In fact, the slowing economy is front and foremost in these vendors' minds.
重点是要拼一下经济的啦，不是老是在喊口号，喊什么选举之类的啦，这个民生要来基层走一走，才知道大家过得很苦了。
对。 为百姓多着想，不要为了他们的利益在那边争取，而百姓都没有在顾，这样我觉得这样不好。
Insiders from the DPP have estimated that support for them in the area has gone down from 70% to less than 40%. And this could foretell woes at the polls for them across the island. Taiwanese political opinion tracker Daily View has projected that the KMT could win 15 out of 22 mayoral and county magistrate seats, while the ruling DPP could win just 5. This as cross-strait relations grow increasingly tense.
In early August, China launched its largest ever military exercises around the island, following U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit. The drill had made more than 70% Taiwanese feel that the chances of a military confrontation across the strait have increased considerably, according to a recent poll.
The DPP's tactic of highlighting Beijing's threat proved successful in the 2020 presidential race when it won a landslide victory. But with cross-strait tensions rising, analysts say such fiery rhetoric against Beijing could turn voters off.
那么这个演习对台湾人民来讲，他更是直接感受得到。另外，刚好乌克兰战争也爆发，就是乌克兰血淋淋的那个战场的那个感受有没有？透过电视的传播，老百姓他基本上从画面里面，他可以推想到，一旦台湾也面临同样的局面的话，台湾会发生什么状况？
With tensions on the rise, Beijing has imposed trade sanctions against some agricultural, fishery, and bakery products from Taiwan, raising concerns among the public.
大陆对于农渔业产品的这种封锁哈，其实对选民来讲的话是非常大的一个打击，特别是中南部的一个选民。
所以也会影响到他们。
这也会影响到他们这个投票的行为。
Taiwan's local elections are usually a chance for voters to show their dissatisfaction with the party in power. But with President Tsai Ing-wen required to step down at the end of her current term, the results could reshape the political landscape for 2024, when the presidential and legislative yuan elections will be held. Victoria Jen, CNA, Taipei.
Back to our top story. We are standing by for Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim to address the media at 8 p.m. Singapore, Hong Kong time. Now, he was sworn in as Malaysia's 10th Prime Minister earlier today. His Pakatan Harapan coalition won 82 seats in last Saturday's election, short of the 112 needed to form a government. The King played a central role in breaking the political impasse, announcing Mr Anwar's appointment after meeting his fellow rulers. And of course, we will be bringing you the latest as soon as all of that happens. And that's Asia Now for this hour. Stick around for the headlines up next.